Welcome to the Mindset Meets Money podcast, where money makes sense. We provide tactical advice to help high-income earners make logical decisions with their money.
Back at the table with Dr. Jason Heller.
Hello, hello.
What biases are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about hindsight bias, which is also called a knew-it-all-along bias. It's when you look back at an event that was not predictable, but basically said, oh, I knew this was going to happen. I knew this would be the result.
Does this have anything to do with the house that you're building here? In hindsight, you wouldn't have bought it and you shouldn't listen to your wife on this one?
That I actually knew I shouldn't have done, but we did it anyway. Yeah, a lot of fun.
So talk to me a little bit about what hindsight bias is and how it affects the investor.
So let's use COVID as an example, right? So COVID, a completely non-predictable event, right? Nobody knew there would be this global pandemic that swept the world, killed millions of people, made tens of millions of people sick.
Clearly, you're not following the accounts on Instagram that show all the different conspiracies that are coming through. This was completely predictable. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, they may have hindsight bias, the people that put this up. But for the investor, it was looking back at this and saying, well, I knew that the market would tank, because of this unpredictable global pandemic, and I should have pulled all my money out of the market, taking wide swings in their portfolio. Now, again, you look back in hindsight, the market crumbled in March and April and May of 2020. Right. But by, I want to say, August, it was already back to pretty much where it had started and was kind of off to the races from there.
Yeah, no, I was kicking myself. So obviously I'm in the industry, I've been in the industry 20 plus years. And, I had a number of friends that had manufacturers in China and plants there. So we were getting word about it in January of kind of what was happening. And I did a really good job of kind of loading up on food, really thinking about all the different things to prep my house and my family. Yeah. And like an idiot, I did not once think about moving my investments to cash and getting out of the market. I didn't even think about the financial side.
Right.
I just worried about, do we have everything in the house needed if we can't actually go to the stores to be able to do it? And in hindsight, I'm like, how did I miss that?
But it worked out for you, because if you didn't look at your portfolio from January 1st to about August 30th, you wouldn't have noticed anything happen.
True.
Right?
Yep.
If you would have panicked and made, shifts, wide swing shifts in March, April, May, you'd have solidified big losses that would have been very hard to come back from when the market upturned and you weren't invested in longer.
And I know a number of people like that. They moved to cash early, and they were actually people that were tied to manufacturing in China, and they moved to cash, but it was 2 years before they got back in.
Sure.
Some of them just kept believing that it was still going to come through, and they didn't want to realized they missed the upswing back, and they didn't want to buy in August. And that maybe hopefully they're buying in right now. We'll see. So how does this affect your investment? So how do I even, realize, how does it make a negative decision for you having a hindsight bias?
So typically in a hindsight bias, you're looking back at something that was not predictable, that you thought was, right? And it poisons you going forward. And what I mean by that is, the next sign. So let's keep using COVID as the example, right? So the market shutters early COVID. By April, May, it's down. I forget what it was, 30 some odd, 40%. I forget, but it was pretty bad. And you've got people looking back saying, I should have. I knew this would happen. I should have done this. Okay. So what's the next thing in their mind? The next time the market wobbles, and what do we know about the market? The market does not escalator ride up, it elevator rides up, right? It has wide swings up and down. You look at the averages since time immemorial, you tend to get a 10% loss roughly once a year on average. You tend to get a 20% loss typically every 2.5 years on average. You tend to get a 5% loss 3 to 5 times every year. Right. So it's not a smooth ride up. And whenever it's a smooth ride up, you have to worry about revision to the mean, because it means too long going easy means you're going to have a longer rough patch just to smooth out the average.
So the punchline of this is, I saw the market drop significantly when COVID happened. And in hindsight, I said, I should have realized that. That was my whole conversation, right? I prepped for everything else. Yep. And I did a poor job prepping financially. Then now the next time something comes, it's a slow indicator that I think of that. I'm going to have that bias that in hindsight, I knew it.
And you're going to overreact.
And then I'm going to overreact and be able to do it at that point then.
Correct.
And so it's the decision making after the event that you're saying in hindsight is the issue at that part.
Correct.
Got it. So let's go to the way we always look at these biases is to say, okay, there is some event that happened in hindsight that I believe I should have caught. I thought I knew it, and I can't believe I missed it, and now that biases, that idea that I should have known, the next event's coming, and I'm going to make a decision based on that. How do you know that's happening?
It's a great question. You never know. So, the old saying is, history doesn't repeat itself, but it looks pretty similar.
Yeah.
Right. And so, one of the things to combat hindsight bias is you have to widen your frame of reference. You have to not think myopically. Right. So again, we go back to, had you said, well, I should have reacted early when I saw this coming. I had friends in China who were saying, hey man, it's coming. It's going to be bad, blah, blah, blah. I remember you and I sat down in your office, and I remember I told you, I think this is going to be like a bad flu. And you said, no, Jason, this is going to be way worse than that. This was like in February, right? And
I remember my nanny thought I was crazy because I was loading up on hand sanitizer, face masks, everything like that.
Did you buy all the toilet paper?
I did not buy all the toilet paper, fortunately. I bought a decent amount, but I bought a lot of stuff, and my nanny and my wife at the time were making fun of me because they thought I was crazy at the time with it. I said it was going to be a really big deal.
Yeah.
But I still left my money all invested and didn't move to cash.
But again, that was probably the best move you made, right? But so to combat hindsight bias, right? And again, with these biases, we're not saying don't feel them, right? Because that's ridiculous, right? No one, we've said this in every episode, we'll probably say it in every other episode going forward. No one is a supremely rational thinker when it comes to these financial decisions. Emotion creeps its way in no matter what. You don't have a choice with this. But so we're not saying ignore this together. We're saying we're not saying ignore this altogether. We're saying, how do you combat this so that you can harness it and not fall victim to it, right? Yep. So you would say, I should have made moves in the first couple of months, or before this drop. That's your hindsight saying, well, this totally unpredictable thing, even though you had better knowledge than probably 90% of people because you have friends over there. I should have done this, right? Yeah. Now, widen your time frame out, right? We talked about, well, what happened 5 months later? So we're perfectly fine, right? The market itself was pretty much right back to where it was. Yep. So in order to combat hindsight bias, you have to widen your frame of reference because.
So a good example would be is we were getting another second peak. If you remember July or August, we were starting to get another second peak at that point, and it happened again around the holidays. You think that you're going to make the same, it's going to have the same impact that it had beforehand, and then you move to cash at that point or something like that, or you make some investment decisions at that point.
And by the way, if you look back at it, so yes, we had peaks of the disease, but we didn't have market troughs that were similar to that in March and April and May.
And so if I'm leaning into kind of what you're saying is your ability to be able to understand your emotions and the fact that you're about to make a decision based on some type of biases, and this one, it's hindsight bias, that might not be in line with the greater macro view of the economy or what's happening at that point, is important to understand. And I think that, listen, this doesn't just apply to investments, it applies to life. But
correct.
Your ability to be self-aware enough to understand when your emotions are helping drive decisions is a real important piece of just navigating life, whether it's a relationship in a marriage, whether it's a relationship with the kids, or whether it's being able to make investment decisions. And in this one in particular, if you go back to the advice you gave, is if you start to realize that you're saying to yourself going, hey, last time I had a feeling that I should have done something and I didn't, and this time I'm not going to make that same mistake. That's self-talk that you're having right there. You have to be aware enough that you're having it.
Yep.
And then at that point, take a step back, and then it goes back to the advice we give a lot of times in these examples is, okay, let's take a look at all the facts. And in particular, it's always good to take not a 12-month view, but go look at the idea of studying history, 10, 20 years, go back to what happened in these multiple events and realize that you're probably making a decision based on not all the facts, but some emotions and almost some frustration with yourself for inaction beforehand, that you're choosing not to do something and you're trying to make up for it there.
Right.
And you're literally trying to make up for it because you beat yourself up for missing something beforehand.
Yep.
So you're going to try to make up for another decision. And as soon as that self-talk's happening, you're realizing going, I'm not making a decision with my investments based on what's happening right now. I'm making a decision based on my investments by this little thing in my head that's arguing back and forth on me making a decision. And as soon as that little voice in your head is arguing back and forth, and that's how you're going back and making a decision, that's where you got to pause and go, okay, wait. Let me go back to the fundamentals of how I choose the right investments.
Correct.
Let me go back to how I actually manage my portfolio or I implement my financial plan. And let me go back to all the different tenets that I use to be able to drive that. And let me make the decision on that, than opposed to the biases I'm feeling on that
Exactly.
side.
The second you feel that you're being led by your emotions as opposed to rational thought and facts. And by the way, again, it's impossible to not have emotions in decision making. But the second you feel that that's the driving factor, you need to slow down your thought process. You need to remember we talked system 1 and system 2 thinking. System 1 is that quick, emotional, reactionary type thinking. System 2 is the plotting, methodical, heavy cognitive load where we're evaluating things and making tough decisions. As soon as you feel system 1 emotionally dragging you away from an important decision, and I'm not talking about you're walking down the grocery aisle and you're figuring, hey, do I buy
extra toilet paper or not?
Extra toilet paper or not? Exactly. I'm talking about, hey, do I make drastic changes in my investment philosophy? Well, if your investment philosophy was grounded in sound before you put it together, it'll be grounded in sound through whatever event happens, whether it be political, whether it be environmental, whether it be a pandemic, whatever it is, and by the way, if it's not, what I've always told clients is if this ends the world and it's Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome time, none of it
doesn't
matters. It doesn't matter anyway.
It doesn't
right? It doesn't matter anyway.
Point, then,
but
yeah. We got a lot bigger issues than to worry about what happened with that portfolio.
Correct.
Yep. And so, I think the hard part and I guess the skill set that people have to learn is that ability to slow down their thinking, be cognitive of system 1, system 2, and really be able to not make decisions based on that part, which is really hard to do. It's really hard to do. But the first part of being able to do it effectively is to realize that there actually is a bias that people make decisions on, and this one is hindsight bias, and that you might be making a decision or might have a feeling to be able to do something because you feel like you missed something in hindsight.
For sure.
And so that's the part you just have to be aware of is what's the motive behind making my next investment decision? Is the motive based on the sound financial plan investment philosophy, or is it based on some emotion to be able to?
So by the way, I teach graduate level behavioral finance, retirement income planning, and leadership at the American College, and unequivocally, we tell practitioners, if you can be better at controlling the behavioral mistakes that clients make, as opposed to being technically sound, you'll have a much stronger impact controlling the behavior than you will being technical.
Oh, look, we have 400 financial advisors that work for the company that you and I work with. And when it comes to working with clients, most of the decisions that have a client succeed on their financial plan or fail on their financial plan is behavioral decisions.
Yeah.
Because, even if you look back in the day, 30, 40, 50 years ago, individual advisors made different stock decisions. Most advisors now realize that the alpha, the actual growth of someone's portfolio and to make a person successful in being able to reach their retirement is helping them manage their behavior and their decision making. It's not picking the right stock. We realize indexes do pretty well.
Yeah.
Versus that, in a good diversified portfolio, we can get a sense of where it's going to go a lot quicker than we can of us individual advisors choosing individual securities on it.
Yep.
So, what we're going through right now, if you can be able to understand the biases that we're reviewing and be able to slow down your decision making, do it, you are going to put yourself light years ahead of most investors, and then opposed to just trying to figure out the best investment.
Absolutely right.
Always insightful, Dr. Heller.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, my friend.
Subscribe on your favorite streaming platform if you haven't already, and don't forget to share this podcast with your friends and family.